Welcome. This is Quinn David Furness. This is my podcast, the Beantown podcast. The People's Podcast is voted by you, the fans. It is Saturday, June 23rd, 2018. This is our, I think, 24th episode. So we are getting close to the halfway spectacular. It's going to happen right around the 4th of July. Just a big celebration for our country. Love America, and America loves the Beantown podcast. So as promised, I'm going to be joined by a guest today who I will introduce in 1 second momentarily. I want to give the Beantown podcast disclaimer. Listening discretion is advised when you're listening to my podcast. First and foremost, we will use some adult language here and there, although neither myself nor my guest have foul mouths by any means, I believe. And then the other thing is that the podcast is objectively terrible, although it's going to be made a little bit less objectively terrible today because I'm joined by one of my good friends, brothers from the School of Music. For those of you who don't know, yes, I was a music major for a brief stint in my life. Lots of stories. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Joining me now on the podcast, John Paul Pendowski. Welcome to the Beantown podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, believe it or not, this is the second interview this month that I've done with a resident of Elk Grove Village, your former high school sweetheart, Maggie J.
Sure.
No, they never dated, but John Paul and Maggie both went to the same high school, same graduating class, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is, wow, Inception almost. Not really, but I'll say it anyways. So John Paul Pendowski is currently a Master's of Music candidate at the DePaul University School of Music in the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. We entered as undergrads together. I graduated in 3 years, but that was still plenty of time for lots of early morning group piano sessions and choir concerts and some shots in the basement of the concert hall. We had time for all of that. So, JP, why don't you just get us started with sharing a little bit of your story about how you decided to commit to majoring in music. Think back, all the way 6 years ago when you were making this choice.
It's kind of when I think back on my decision to go into music and to become a musician and sort of embark on this sort of wild ride that is being a musician, I've always thought about being a pianist and doing music, especially in high school, when they sort of prime you into like, well, what do you want to do and what type of things do you want to get into? I was always under the impression that I would do something with music. And I mean, it makes sense. In high school, I was like that guy that knew so much about music. I was that pianist who would do stuff and was known primarily for the piano for a lot of people who didn't know me personally. And so, it just became such a big part of my identity as a high schooler, and I couldn't really imagine breaking it off and not doing that in college. And so, I sort of just went into the audition process as if it were the most normal thing that could happen. And when I started auditioning my junior year, it was just like, well, where do I want to go? And, it wasn't a question of, do I really want to do music? And I mean, we have a lot of friends that before their junior year of high school really didn't know if they were going to do music. Like if you remember cello David, David from our graduating class or my graduating class, he didn't know, or even Sean didn't know if he was going to be a musician up until like late in his high school career. But for me personally, I sort of felt that music was this calling that I couldn't ignore. And so that's really like how I got into auditioning and going to DePaul. And it only helped that my parents are both alums of DePaul as well. My dad having a degree in music from there. And so, that's kind of it.
Two things. I recall a couple musicianship classes here and there when our professor Kurt would call you Jim. That's your dad's name, right? Jim or James?
He called me James, like at least twice.
I remember that happening. The other thing, back to what you were saying about, people we know who didn't decide to major in music until late in their life. I think I recall Dominic, guitar player, he didn't even start playing guitar until like his freshman year of high school.
No kidding.
I don't know that as fact, but I think I recall in between one of the conversations about the Anaheim Ducks, I think he slipped that in at some point. So,
I mean, if you ever get him talking about the Anaheim Ducks.
Well, hopefully he was happy this year, because as bad as the Anaheim Ducks were, the Blackhawks were even worse, and neither team made the playoffs.
Yikes, man! I know.
Yeah. Getting back to the topic here. So you have a little extension of this story, because you've made a choice that actually both you and one of our good friends Ryan made, and that is to go to the exact same school and the same program, more or less, and the same teacher for your master's degree. So talk us through a little bit more about how you made that decision.
So it wasn't really it was kind of a hard decision to make when I was ending my undergraduate career, and I was thinking about what I was going to do, and like what were my goals as a musician going forward, and having to think about that for so long, really pushed me to like weird, extents of what I could do with music, what music really meant to me. And so there are a few factors that go into my decision to going back. One of the bigger ones being that, two of the bigger ones. I take a break per se. I know that for a lot of people, it's a great decision to take some time off from school, like to focus on yourself, maybe like accrue some money before going back and like spending it all on the tuition again. But for me, it was like knowing myself, I wanted to stay in a routine that kept me working and kept me like pushing towards a goal rather than like becoming a little bit, what's the word for it? Like sort of staying down in my career and, not really practicing as much with all my free time. And so that sort of temptation and the worry that I wouldn't practice for a year if I took a year off sort of pushed me into taking my master's at DePaul. Another thing too is just my goals for what I wanted to do music shifted substantially while I was like in my last year, and it made a lot more sense for me to go into DePaul and use it as a stepping stone towards a better musical goal. I would serve like what I wanted from music after my master's degree. And so like and I mean like going back to George as well and back to my instructor, it's he's such a great performer, and he has so many insights, and his prominence in Chicago as like one of the best pianists in Chicago really like stands out among like where you can go and what you can do. And I mean, I'm throwing a lot of information at you that should be taken into account for anyone who wants to go back. I mean, I think kept me in Chicago, kept me in DePaul really was that I was starting to spread out, rooting my career in Chicago, and I was getting a bit more work, and I was making a lot more connections. And so for me, it made sense to stay in Chicago and work another goal in music, while also retaining like my students, being able to set up my career in Chicago that has like boundless amounts of opportunities, and so that really went into why I wanted to stay at DePaul. Would I have liked to go to another school? That would have been nice. I think part of it has to fall on I have to blame myself a little bit for not preparing enough for that, but at the same time it comes with its pros and cons of living in a big city.
Yeah. One thing that I'm actually curious about, and I think I partially know the answer, what did the finances of this look like? You think about just sticking around in DePaul versus, you might go somewhere else, Michigan or USC or wherever to get your master's in music. I don't know what the expenses look like in that instance. So how did the finances, the financial aid, did that come into play at all?
So I actually didn't apply for any financial aid for this year or for the next year as well. I didn't get full tuition, but I got a substantial amount, maybe about 70 or 75% of it paid for. And so for me, it was a better decision to go and to just pay it off and not have to accrue any more debt than I already have. And that played into why I went back as well, considering that, like, not like some people don't get, the opportunity to go back with scholarship and to have their schooling paid for. And so trying to be grateful with the opportunity I was given, I didn't want to pass up.
Yeah. So to clarify, you're not getting financial aid per se, but you're on scholarship from the School of Music, right?
I'm on scholarship. Yeah. I'm on scholarship, and I'm just paying tuition out of pocket.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. I mean, for a school like DePaul, who's a solid music school, but not, the top of the top, it's, you can get that scholarship from them, and I'm sure that they're pretty eager to hand that out to you because they know your abilities, they know your potential, whereas you can go to another Master of Music program, and it might be more highly rated than DePaul. It might be the same rating as DePaul, but they don't know you as well, and so you're taking a little bit more of a gamble with the finances in general. So yeah. So you're not on like a government federal aid of any kind, but you are getting a lot of it covered by scholarship, and that's an important thing. I know this is a conversation that we've had frequently in the past, but I haven't had this conversation with you in a couple months now. So talk me through a little bit about career interests, goals, this point next year, what you hope to be doing. Give us a little glimpse into that.
Gladly. So what has really piqued my interest the last few years has been more of the research side of music. Going into the fine details around, surrounding how music developed, and to be really broad with it, like the cultural and the philosophical implications surrounding music and its development. So what sort of started me on this path towards research was it's going to feel or sound like it's a long story, but I promise it won't be too. At a time at a concert where I listened to, I had heard my first Prokofiev. And, from then on, I was just sort of taken by his music, and I was so amazed and, in wonder about how he could write something, so seemingly random, so jarring and disgusting, and yet have it be like this masterwork of music that I can just enjoy time and time again. And so, I started like looking into it by myself. I played a sonata, like I play his music, and I look through it, I listen to it frequently, and I did that a lot. And what inevitably happened was it led me into other Russian musicians and composers of the same time period, and thinking about how their environment and how their political standing and like the culture surrounding them pushed them into a musical sound that was sounded. I'm speaking mainly of like Prokofiev, Stravinsky, those big guys. And to some extent, like Khachaturian, but it's another conversation. And so that interests me a whole lot. And so I brought it to Dr. Elias, who told me, gave me some direction about what I should be doing, and sort of oriented me towards musicology. And so that was my plan last year, was that I wanted to take DePaul as a way of getting myself rooted in Chicago, but then also using my performance degree that I would get as a master's student to look more into this, into my interest with Russian piano music, and give myself more of a chance to study it. And so what it's become lately, especially with having written some substantial work on it, I've really become interested in how Russian music, spanning before the 18th century, was just so anti-Western. It was heavily based on either Orthodox music or secular music that was spread around orally or through tradition. And so they sort of roar into the 18th century when they, with Peter the Great, getting into the West and using France as their standard for understanding culture. And so that's sort of a big deal, and I think what's really interesting for me is seeing how the interplay of cultures, and mainly how sort of the view of Russia as a sort of Oriental sound, as an Oriental culture, really piqued everyone in the West's interest. They really had a feel for that Oriental Orientalist sound, as they called it, Orientalism. And I remember reading about a quote that was from the Guide Musical, a French magazine of sorts, or journal, that basically said, like, the Russians afforded so much beautiful sound because of their proximity to the Orient, and their ability to like tap into those sounds and those harmonies, just automatically affords them a richer musical history and musical culture. And so it's sort of that study that is really interesting to me, and by association, that like pouring into the historical musics of Russia pre-1800 or 1700 rather, that is all based on these Oriental melodies and all of this these more ancient Russian musics.
Yeah, you and I have had extensive conversations in the past about Alexander Scriabin specifically, who at one point in a young Quinn's music career, I spent a summer writing a 20-page research paper about his styles, comparing and contrasting, and how they changed and why they changed. But you mentioned the Russian and kind of Parisian French styles connecting with each other at some point in history. And if you look at an early Scriabin work and you listen to it, one could easily confuse it for a Chopin piece, and then you give it another 5 years and all of a sudden Scriabin's writing piano stuff that sounds like nothing else at the time and is really difficult to play and really difficult to understand. So yeah, it's definitely very volatile. It changed quickly, but like you said, it's fascinating. It's certainly cosmopolitan, yet at the same time there's this distinct Russian sound, and I think Tchaikovsky does a good job, among others, of capturing that. As I ramble here, have you ever, I'm holding in my hand right now a collection of essays by Richard Tarskin, who's, you may or may not know, I assume you know at this point, his essays on Russian music. Have you ever picked up this volume? It's just like a green cover. It's titled On Russian Music, and it's just a collection of about 35 different Tarskin essays.
Yeah, I actually own the book.
Very good.
It was part of my research, just looking through it. He has a lot of really interesting things to say about, I don't know if you've read through the early chapters, but like Bortniansky and his work with Baldassare Galuppi, and how that worked with like the Orthodox Church, and then with Dragomishsky as well. His writing, to get into it a little bit, is always really fun to read, just because he's such a provocateur. He's kind of like, if you get on his bad side, like, he'll flame you really hard. Yep. And it's funny because like he kind of like in the most concise ways, he'll give like a scathing review of someone's like criticism of him, and I guess like his book isn't without drama, and it really draws attention because of that. While at the same time, he's got such a vast knowledge of Russian music that just sort of, it comes off as being almost completely natural, like that his style of writing is almost conversational, and he's speaking to you in the room. Yeah,
boy, talking about 19th century Russian music and operas on the Beantown podcast, that's just what everyone comes here for. So you're welcome,
I would
listeners.
assume so.
I'll briefly, so that we don't get terribly long here, because there are a couple other things that I definitely want to touch on, and we're already into 19 minutes here. I'll briefly share my story. I think we're going to transition this now into sort of talking about outcomes and just sharing. We already shared a little bit, kind of on the front half of being a music major and how you decide to get into it, but the types of things that are happening on the back end post-graduation are really fascinating as well. So for those of you, most of you who know me probably know that I was a music major with John Paul, with a lot of the other guys that we mentioned here. For 3 years, I chose it really because I was 17 and I had no idea what I wanted to study. I'd always been a really good student in high school, so I wasn't concerned about not being able to do something other than maybe like engineering, because I really didn't like AP Physics. But I chose to study music because I knew that I had a good talent for the piano, and it just seemed like something I could do, and I knew that I was going to get a good financial aid package as well because of the scholarship stuff that we talked about. So I actually kind of came around to this musicological way of thinking before a lot of people do. I actually knew, applying to schools, that was what I wanted to do. I never had an interest in spending, 4 years as a music major, and practicing hardcore 3-4 hours a day and giving a bunch of these concerts, because I get just absolutely terrible stage anxiety. So I came in knowing that I wanted to do that research, and I think it was just it was a combination for me at DePaul, and why I won't say things didn't work out, because I actually had a great time, but why I didn't end up pursuing musicology was a combination of two things. One, I'm very much just a laid back is one thing, but I do better when the opportunities are sort of placed in front of me. I'm not as good at kind of just going out and taking things for myself, whether that be research opportunities or jobs or performance opportunities, whatever. So that was the first half of it. The second half of it is, and John Paul, you've done a much better job of navigating this than I have, but there aren't a ton of musical research opportunities, or even staff or faculty members at our school, right? Our school definitely does not, or I guess your school, it's not my school anymore. There isn't a huge emphasis on research, and there isn't a huge appetite for it either. I mean, I know you, and if I sat down for a couple minutes and thought I could probably identify one or two other music majors that I knew who were interested in research, but beyond that, it's pretty much performance, and it's technology, and it's education at DePaul. There really isn't much in the way of the types of things that you're interested in and that I'm interested in. So I think it was a combination of those things that led me to just kind of get out of it. And then the other thing is I know that you're still somewhat experiencing this, but I know you've experienced it more hardcore in the past, is just this living from gig to gig, paycheck to paycheck, not always sure when your next big money boost is going to come in. And for me, who is someone that struggles with anxiety and likes knowing when my paycheck is coming, that was just a lifestyle that I don't know, I really struggled to throw myself fully into. So I ended up going to grad school and getting a degree in education, and the rest is history. But it's certainly, and I'll wrap up my story here, it's certainly a skill that you never have taken away from you, which is particularly useful as a piano person, because, maybe a church needs a accompanist, or maybe anybody needs an accompanist, or maybe you have the opportunity to teach a little bit. You certainly get rusty and significantly worse as you don't consistently practice and hone your craft. I'm a living example of that. But at the end of the day, I can still sit down and I can play you my scales, and I know music theory like it's a second language, which is a huge thing that I know you and I have talked about in the past, is the advantage that pianists have with just knowing music theory inherently. So those are still things that I carry with me to this day. I'll be listening to my iPod and listening to a random song, and almost without me realizing it, I'll just be thinking, okay, 1, 4, 6, 2, 5, back to 1, that sort of thing. That just, I don't know, that runs in the back of my operating system, which is kind of weird, but also I think really cool. So I'll wrap my story up there because it wasn't very exciting. But let's just talk a little bit about some of the people that we have known or currently know, and who are all music majors at some point, whether they left school or they graduated or they switched majors. We'll include all of that here. So I'll get it started off with a couple of people who some of them I keep in touch with, some of them I just see on Facebook. But our friend Jack, who I know did a lot of like house party concerts, and there's some good videos, and he actually has one song on YouTube that has like 80,000 views or something, but he still records. I know he just dropped a new track on SoundCloud like a week ago, and I listened to it. It's really fun. But he works full time in Boulder as a software engineer, which is related directly to, he was a performing arts technology, if that's what they call it, major. And so he's doing that. So he got into the engineering game, and I hope that he continues to record music and play with whatever band he's recording with, because that's actually really good. I promised I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it. If you're interested, go check out Jack Campbell on SoundCloud, and he has some music videos on YouTube. Jack, I hope you don't mind, because I'm sure you listen to the podcast all the time. I love your music. Another guy, Nick, who I never knew super closely, but I almost wish I knew better, because he was always really nice to me, and I didn't have any issues with him. He goes to Wash U in St. Louis, and he's in law school, which is definitely a unique twist. I don't know of any other people in our class that either went to law school or went to med school. That's just like not a thing that happens very often. So here's a unique story that I wanted to touch on. Our friend Jang, who I grew up in the same town with, he goes to IIT, and he's doing an architecture degree, out of all things. Played soccer against Jang in high school. Miguel, he stayed at DePaul, but he switched. Was he math or engineering or something? I don't remember.
I think computer science.
Computer science, that's right. I remember that. So he stayed at school. He just decided to do something else differently. Chris, who I don't think either of us really knew that well, but he was in school for like 1 year, maybe 2, and he works as a mechanic, an auto mechanic now, which is definitely something different. So that was just a rundown of some of the people that I don't necessarily keep in touch with, but I see on their Facebook feeds what they're doing. Do you have any other unique stories of what people have been doing since either graduation or since their days as a music major?
Well, I mean, the first one that I always think about is you, like getting your degree and then going into education. Like, I think that was like, I don't know if anyone expected it. I mean, I knew that you were going into it just because we kept in contact and we used to talk. And off the top of my head, we've got our old classmates too, though. Like my Henry, who he jobs, he'll gig around the city whenever, or he'll even take gigs out of the city and stuff like that. I think coming out of music school, idea that when you're in music school that you'll go into it'll be this really nice thing where you'll get a job playing the instrument that you've practiced so hard on. But I think a lot of times or at least a lot more commonly than you might expect, trying to think of other some of our other classmates that might have taken other roads. And I mean, unfortunately, it's my memory is betraying me, but.
Well, I think the most common thing that I see are people are certainly, after graduation, they're playing in orchestras. That's a pretty common thing to do, but for most people, that's not gonna, give you your living paycheck. So I think the standard is to get out, play in orchestras, do a lot of gigging around the city, and then potentially start getting into the teaching game as well. But you'll see that they're, Henry, he used to drive for Uber. Does he still do that?
I think he does.
Yeah, and our friend Sean works at a coffee shop. So it's certainly some of the outsider perspective stereotypes where you're working a bunch of different jobs to try to make ends meet. That's certainly true. I'm definitely glad that we lived in and used to live in Chicago and not a place like Manhattan, or even you go to a place like Berkeley or something, and it's in Boston, and living right there is just crazy expensive. And Chicago really isn't that bad, and it's big enough to where there are a lot of different places you can live, and it's actually really affordable compared to a lot of other places. So, yeah, I guess moral of the story here is there are a bunch of different things that people go into. I mean, we have such a small sample size. The graduating class for us is like 70 people. But one other thing, our friend Steven has done a lot of odd jobs since graduating. He does a lot of like working as a setup and teardown crew, working weird hours, late hours, lots of like third shift stuff. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff all over the place, and doing a lot of gigs and part-time jobs to make ends meet. But I guess the old adage is true: if you love what you're doing, then it's worth it. And I think that underlying philosophy might have been the biggest thing for me, is that I never truly loved performing, and I still don't, and I never have, and I probably never will. And I got to the point where I realized I just didn't love, music research, because, you want to do something like that and you want to become a faculty member in musicology or ethnomusicology, then you pretty much exclusively have to go get your PhD as well. And that's just, whether it's finances or time or just your own personal happiness, that is a huge commitment. And I just was definitely not ready to take that step. Are you, JP, are you thinking of going the PhD route?
Absolutely. I have my schools lined up. That's actually why I've been writing papers, or trying to do so, the last 8 months or so. It's just been to prepare myself for entrances, and so that's going to happen relatively soon. I think it's coming up quicker than I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What programs are you looking at?
I'm definitely looking at University of Chicago. I guess with them, the question is whether or not to go into ethnomusicology or a music history sort of aspect of musicology. There's that. I'm looking at Northwestern, of course. I'm looking at Madison, MSU, Boston University, and then I'm going to apply for Columbia, because I know that Richard Taruskin is there.
Yeah.
And so, hope, it's a long shot. Oh yeah, also Yale as well. I mean, I know that Yale is trying to build up its music school and trying to build up its program. So, not to say that they're doling out money, but there are definitely opportunities at Yale if you want to pursue music.
What is the process, application components look like? Is it just you submitting essays that you've written, research papers, or what are they looking for?
It's basic. So I think the meat of the application is that it's all the work that you've done, the papers that you've written and stuff that they can, I guess ascertain what your study is, and whether or not they want to I guess help you get to where you want to go. The other part is you need to take the GRE, and so I'm prepping for that as well. And then what is it? And then just having a good CV, or having a good artist statement as well. Most of the programs that I've looked at don't require much else other than that, and a master's degree. But that's why I'm spending so much time trying to get my papers underway. I've got one more to write, and after that, it'll just be fine tuning for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Hey, if you want any GRE tips, you're talking to the master over here.
Hey,
so.
I will hit you up for those tips, man. I'm I haven't taken a standardized test in 5 years now. So
yeah, man, you're gonna have to revamp your Algebra 2 knowledge, bring that back to life.
Yikes.
So, and some statistics.
Is that what they do? Algebra 2?
It's a lot of Algebra 2 and some basic statistics and.
Okay.
A hefty amount of geometry as well. I don't remember if there's any trig on there, but I know geometry plays a significant part. So
that's fine for me. It's more of I'm just afraid of it getting anywhere until past Calc 1 stuff, because that's where they sort of dropped off with math.
No, there's no calculus or anything beyond that on the GRE, which is nice. I have one other. Not maybe big question, but question I want to pose to you before we start to wrap it up and just reminisce a little bit here. But my last big question for you is, in what ways did you change or grow significantly in your first year of grad school?
So I guess one of the biggest things that's happened to me, or like, you know, how my character has changed, is more like I value, I'm coming to a point where I value having time to myself, and I value like having, you know, basically enough time to prepare something well. You know, because a lot of times when you're starting off in music, you're in this mindset, or at least I was, where I didn't want to turn any gig down. I didn't want to pass up an opportunity, because like, you know, it was more than just making money. It was like, you know, you're putting your name out there, like people know that you can do this, and you know, if they know that they can call you and you'll answer the first time, there's, you know, definitely a case to be made about them calling you a second time and getting that gig again. And so like there's a sort of need and a will for myself to be established in the musical community and trying to get myself out there and like build a resume, because at that point I didn't really have anything to go off of. But so like as of late, you know, this last year I've been able to pick up work and, you know, really build on my resume in ways that are like, you know, having regular work, teaching, you know, for institutions and doing stuff like that. And so what I've come to appreciate a lot more is, you know, creating a schedule that allows me to either you know, both have enough time to myself, and that's, you know, that was part of, you know, that came about as I was, you know, living in Chicago, you know, going around trying to you know, get enough time to do both school, both work, and then practicing. And so there's that. And then the other part too is I've come to really appreciate simplification and simplifying almost anything. You know, pressing, simplifying a routine, or, you know, making your life simpler has made my life so much easier. And it's sort of like a lesson that I've had to learn continuously over this entire year, because I was still in that mindset where opportunity, but by simplifying my life and by basically being real with how much I could do and how much I could reasonably handle, I was able to, you know, make for myself a better environment with which I was supposed to, like, you know, work and do things. And so that's if I were to go back and tell myself something that I needed to know, it would be like, don't be afraid to say no, and, you know, definitely simplify. Like, nothing has to be so complex that you know, that you sort of lose sight of what you're doing. Having that end goal in mind at any point is what simplification should be about.
Yeah, I promised my listeners last week when I announced that you were going to be joining us that you had a lot of sage wisdom and advice, and I always look forward to our conversations because I think you're much better at articulating advice than I am. So it's always nice to have you share your thoughts, because it makes a big difference to me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Last thing before we wrap up here, we're already pretty deep in. I don't want to keep it too much longer on your weekend here. Just sharing any of your favorite memories from undergrad. They don't have to be related to us. Just anything that you thought was really fun. I have a couple that I wrote down. Some of them I'm sure you'll remember and find fun. Some of them are just for my own benefit. But taking shots in the basement of the concert hall. I think we usually drank shitty vodka. I'm glad I said vodka, because that reminded me, in your old apartment on Sheffield, I remember you used to have that stupid marshmallow vodka, and that stuff just tasted like ass. Oh my God, that was terrible.
That was the worst thing I've ever bought, and the only reason I bought it was because like they were selling it at 90% off at at CVS, and so I was like, you know, this is probably good for mixing. Absolutely terrible for everything. It ruined everything it touched.
There was one time, this must have, oh yes it was, because some of us were 21, some of us weren't. We went to that CVS south of your apartment by Binny's, and was it me and Ryan? We were just like bumming around and trying to get you to buy the alcohol, and the lady wouldn't sell to us because
when we bought Tecate, remember that?
Yeah.
Because she wanted all of us to be over 21 at that point.
That was a small window because when's your birthday? Like September?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I am the last one to turn 21. That's March. So yeah, it must have been sometime during that school year. Oh, that was frustrating. Group piano in general is just something I'll never forget. Partially because of our instructor, Carpe Diem. Just a lot of their class started 8:30 a.m. Is that when they started? Yeah. Just I mean, good for getting out of the way. But I can recall particularly our sophomore year, a lot of days when I would wake up at like 6 a.m., take the train down from Uptown, get a coffee at the student center as soon as it opened at 7:30, and then go practice for group piano for like 45 minutes. That was the only time I would ever look at my stuff. And I can distinctly remember some class periods where you walk in like 30 seconds before you're expected to play because you would always sit in the front row. And some days I just felt so bad because it just was not working for you.
I don't know if you remember, but sometimes I'd come and I'd be like, I'm not doing this. And I would sit far in the back and I would shaft Ryan, who always sat next to me. And so you'd have to deal with the first of it.
I know. I can't believe that Sato, I think he just didn't care enough, but I can't believe that he never like did a randomization thing going because man, they were definitely. I think I was always pretty good at this, but I know people like Maxwell and Caution to an extent definitely utilized their position in the rotation to get stuff done. So I also distinctly remember a couple class periods because I was usually the second to last one to go, especially after Sam dropped out. But I can recall like leaving the classroom as Maxwell is playing and just listening to it not going well. And I just take one last look back and we make eye contact. And in that moment, I just felt so bad.
Oh, man. But some of those things he made us do, though, were pretty rough, though. Like having so sight reading, like, multiple part, like, orchestrations was really hard.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I just think, like, none of us ever took it too seriously, and that was the big problem. I loved coming in like on those certain Fridays where we'd all have to play, and we'd all have to play Beethoven reductions, and we'd all get there, and like there'd be some times where it'd be like I definitely looked at the part and it's solid, and then there are times where I'm like, oh man, like, I'm hoping I can remember what this one sounds like.
Yep, and I think we got together probably somewhere between our sophomore and junior years, and we played Beethoven 5 in the green room.
Yep.
And I just remember getting to the end, and we both knew how it sounded. Even the last one is very famous, but it just we took it too fast. And C major isn't exactly the easiest key to play in, and it was
surprisingly everyone starts on that, but it's definitely like this weird awkward key to play in.
Yeah, I don't know what the physical stuff is behind it and the spacing of your fingers, but it's not easy. I'll keep going here because we're running long, but this one was just my own one. we had like a test prep class session in musicianship when Dr. Hutter was teaching us. I don't even know if you were in this class in this section, but I remember one time, because these classes are at 8:30 a.m. and you're a college student, I woke up and went to class in my sweatpants and probably like a hoodie or something. And we were doing like this weird Family Feud style thing, like at the buzzer where two people go up and it's like whoever can answer it faster. And I remember the first time I walked up, all Dr. Hutter said, and this is way better if you know him, which obviously no one does, but he's hilarious. All he says is, nice of you to get dressed up. And it was this combination of like me feeling embarrassment, but also just like laughing because I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. So that was a fun one. One that I just thought of like 5 minutes ago that I loved. When you played piano for, was it You're a Dead Man, Charlie Brown? A lot of what I talk about is Hot Snoopy, and that's a topic for another time. But you had to play to accompany Lucy in one of the songs. You were playing the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata, I think, and your music like flew away or fell off the stand or something.
Oh, yeah.
And you played it by memory,
geez.
and you killed it. And I think, was it Ryan and I, we were there, or me and Steven, I don't remember. But
you and Ryan were there for sure.
Yeah.
I remember like getting out of that being like, oh, I don't want to do this ever again. I mean, I think one of my favorite parts about that whole ordeal was for all the listeners who ever watch Always Sunny. They had asked me to do incidental music. Do you watch Always Sunny, Quinn?
Yep.
They had asked me to do incidental music, and I needed something heroic sounding. So, of course, the first thing that came to mind was a piano reduction of the Dayman song, and I was able to slip that in both concerts.
I love that. I used to do that in church, and I would never do anything as bold as that, but like you're playing while the pastor's praying or something, and they'll say like a particular phrase that triggers some song in your head, and you just work it in, and you're probably the only one in the room who gets it, but you're having fun either way. That's something that's great about piano. You can't really do that with anything else.
No, I mean, you get to accompany yourself, right?
Yeah. Keep yourself company. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but just all the choir songs that we sang, particularly in our freshman year when we had a different conductor, and the songs he chose, like Bring Us In, Good Ale, and Bali Laka. Does that ring any bells for you?
Was that the American rock song that we ended up doing, where it just sounded like it needed a ripping guitar solo over it?
Bali Laka was like the South Asian one with the Sagadugu 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 and
that's the one.
America stretched into 4 syllables, and I don't even think I'm confident that sounded like total garbage when we actually sang it in the concert. We just never got that going.
I forget about the Sagadugu part. That's gold. That's DePaul gold.
They were 16th notes, and the quarter note was already like 100 beats or something. It was just that was brutal. I mean, for all the crap that we sang in our 2 years of choir, we also got to do some fun things. We did Mozart's Requiem in the church, which was really cool. So, there were good days and bad days in choir.
I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you know this story, but I remember so when we did Mozart Requiem the first time, it was with Michael, and it was a heavy performance. It was like something profound. So I remember that same night. It was someone's birthday, and I went out and I had just a bit too much to drink, and like that, I remember we had to get up, we had to be there by 1 p.m., and I just remember standing there for 45 minutes straight, completely hungover, singing Mozart's Requiem. And I like to think that that's an experience that only music school students would ever have, and it's something that we should I'd care because of that. Like singing this beautifully profound and sad piece of music, and you're also just hung over the entire.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is true everywhere, but certainly at DePaul, that time when you're a freshman and a sophomore, where you have the total liberty to just be a total, not necessarily a slacker, but just do whatever you want and get away with it, and there won't be really any consequences, especially because you're singing in a 70-person choir where you can pull that off. I was never drunk for any concerts in college. I never had the balls, nor did I ever want to do that. But I wouldn't be surprised, and I could give you a list of a couple names of guys that I wouldn't be surprised if they were for those concerts. One other thing, or I have a couple other things, but there was that conversation in the music student lounge where we were sitting with our friend Kasha, and this was when she was together with Tom number 1, not to be confused with Tom number 2, and she had left her phone, which is just a very un-Kasha thing to do, and went to the bathroom, and of course Tom calls, and I got a shining moment here I got to take advantage of, and I remember picking up, and I said something like, "Oh yeah, she's just getting out of the shower or something." And people who are listening to this don't know Kasha, but they definitely don't know Tom, and neither do we really. But
no, not at all.
They really had some probably not the healthiest relationship and some insecurities, and I was a total dick, but at the same time, it was too easy. So that was one of my favorite ones.
That was hilarious. I know Ryan and I definitely like died like listening to that. We're just like, oh man, like there's no way he just did that.
Yeah. One other. I have one other good one, and then I'll turn it over to you to finish up if you have any fun memories. That one night, I think it was I don't know if it was our sophomore year or junior year, but it might have been our. I actually don't remember. You remember the night where we ended up at Danny's house?
Oh my god! That was the same night we did the shots in the concert hall.
Yeah, we had. I think we did some shots in the concert hall. Then we went to a concert, which ended up being like way too long. And
it was Rite of Spring.
I thought it was like a new music thing or something. Because didn't we leave early?
It was Rite of Spring. We left right afterwards.
Okay. So we left, and then we went downtown, right? We took the train downtown.
Oh my, yeah, we went all the way downtown. I don't even know why we went downtown.
Well,
we
had
went
a friend
to meet my friend. Yeah.
And we met them on the street for like 2 minutes. And then we ran into that guy, and he was pissed about something. And
with a hat, right?
Yeah, something with a hat. I don't remember why. And then I think my plan was just like, because I was drunk this whole time, which is not a common thing for me to do. But we somehow stumbled into Danny's party, which he lived in like Lakeview or something. And I just remember I had a handle of Smirnoff in my backpack. And this is probably like the worst thing I ever did. And well, a couple of other bad things that I won't talk about. But I was just like handing out shots to freshmen who were at that party, and like out of the handle, and yeah, I think the night ended after that. But that was a weird night.
That was a weird night. I think that was before like the ride sharing craze. I remember not having like Uber or Lyft at that point, and
sure.
So like.
Well, yeah, just ride that train up and down all night.
Oh man, it's free.
Do you have any memories or reminiscences from undergrad or really any of your time at DePaul that really stick out to you?
So I have two, just two to keep it short, and they're more general. But so like some of my favorite moments in general, and just some of my favorite like times were had after group piano when we would go and get coffee with all the pianists, and we would just like shoot the shit for like maybe a couple hours max, maybe hour and a half before we had to go to studio or before we had to practice. And those conversations always ended up like at a place you wouldn't expect them, but because of that they just have such a special place for me. Just having that, just meeting up every Friday and just having that time to hang out was it's invaluable. And those are the moments that stuck with me. It was always you there first. I would get there sometime around. Good old Ryan would show up sometime.
Sorry guys. I just woke up. I'll be there in like 20 minutes, and then he gets there 45 minutes later.
And I think like one of the fun parts about that too is like it's sort of the first fruits of like us having a thing, and then we'd have like guests show up at some point. Like I know Steven would show up from time to time. We'd have Max there from time to time too. Yeah. Just like it was always just a positive hang and a positive experience for all of us. And we got to like talk about ideas we had going on, or like share new music, or just like be dumb. And it was just like it was the best, because I think that's where a lot of our friendships all really just bloomed because of that. And then the second one that that I sort of take to heart a lot of the time is we used to have a thing, it was our junior year, around sophomore junior year, where Thursdays we would hang out and watch movies. And the movie thing fell through eventually when we all got busy. But there was that certain time when we got to introduce Ryan to all those Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And I just, that was fun for me. You pick up some beer, like we get some Stella, and we'd and this is before like the huge IPA craze and before we got into the craft stuff. But we just get beer and just hang out and watch Star Wars, and it was just like such a good experience for me. Something that I miss a lot actually is having a regular movie night. And so. Oh,
you guys had that giant ass TV that was good for movies.
They still have a weird ass TV, man. It's huge and it's like 70 pounds.
Yeah, I imagine.
Such a bitch to move.
Yeah, and then one time last year, like just randomly, one time Ryan and I drove down to that place where you live for, I think just 1 year or 2 years maybe, and we watched 2001. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. That was the first time Ryan had ever seen it too, right? I know you've got a big movie knowledge, so I think you had seen it before, right?
Yeah, I had, but not for a while, and not like as an adult. So, yeah, that was fun. I'd forgotten a lot of like those Thursday nights would be going to the thing in the student center, picking up the free food, which was usually pretty terrible.
Oh, it was always horrible. I think in general it was bad food.
Oh,
but it was free.
I'm so upset with myself. I was going to take a picture of this. I was at a college that was hosting a regional college fair for high school students in central Pennsylvania, Shippensburg University. I was there on Thursday, and as I was driving out, I drove past it was in the dining hall, and I drove past a truck, and on the side, it was Chartwell's, the infamous provider of DePaul food. Yeah.
Oh man, it's just everywhere. Did you stop in and get some soggy fries?
Love some soggy fries or some I don't know, taco salads or pizza that wasn't that good.
Taco salad's one of the most horrible things humans have created. Like if it's not amazing, it's just the most awful thing.
Yeah, I always just remember
pathetic.
Yeah, it was just too much lettuce and too much beans, and the meat had no flavor, and the bowls were just either way too crispy or nothing going on. So, yeah, that and then what Brownstones, is that what the coffee shop was named? That was pretty bad coffee, man.
I remember one time. This is a bad memory for me. I just remember one time running on about 3 hours of sleep, and I went to Brownstones right after our musicianship class. I drank that was when they had 30 ounces of beer, not beer, coffee you could get. I drank those 30 ounces in 10 minutes, and I felt sick the entire day. And that meal, what is it? The meal plan money just backfired on me at that point.
It was fun for a couple months, and then you were just man, the variety really isn't that great. And I go, occasionally I'll go to the primary dining hall where I work, and the quality is just night and day better, but also the variety. And you would think that, I don't know, I guess the DePaul Student Center has variety because of all the different types of restaurants it have, but I don't know, it didn't quite do it for me. So yeah, DePaul food definitely got a lot of flack. And when I was a student, I think I remember defending it a little bit more, but looking back now and having tried other colleges and university dining halls, man, that was rough. So I don't know if that's DePaul, I don't know if that's Chartwell's, I don't know if it's some of both, but yeah, not great. That's more or less what I wanted to get through. We're right at an hour here, which is going to be the longest podcast, I think. So apologies for keeping you so much, but I'll be in Chicago 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from today, I'm advertising this to the world because it's going to be a blowout. So I hope Ryan and Sean are okay with that because they're the ones who live there. It's a farewell to Farwell, my old apartments. They're finally moving out of it. I think the rent there is it's $1,700 a month, I think, for 4 bedrooms, which is a steal, but it also means that it is a trash pile.
It's a huge trash heap.
JP, you're going to be there, right?
I will be there.
Okay, absolutely. I don't want anybody flaking on this because it's one time I'm in Chicago and it's just an absolute rager of a party. So, yeah, we got to get everybody who's anybody there. I want to see everybody from school. So,
I'll bring my brother out. He'll know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. He can serenade us with some Malmsteen, maybe some guitar.
Oh,
yeah.
Give me some of that Yingwei.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff. If anybody doesn't know, Malmsteen, go check out the Icarus Dream, which is was a popular video among us when we were undergrads. One other thing that just popped into my head that, I don't know why we did this so much, and I don't think you were ever a super active part of it. I think I was definitely the instigator, but you remember all the Facebook group chats we had and all the variations And
Yep.
I was just like, why did we do that so much? I guess that was our primary way of communicating because we didn't group text for whatever reason. But yeah, there were too many. I'm convinced that's like.
I still have all the. They're like relics now. They're just existing in my messenger. I just have them, and I see them from time to time. Like, yeah, that was a thing.
Well, and there was always a different variation because of whoever the flavor of the month, like other person that was close to our friend group was. So I won't name any names, but I'm sure you remember all those different people. So
I do.
I actually am going to ask you about one of those people after we wrap up here. So let me close it out here because we are 61 minutes into the podcast. I want to thank John Paul Pendowski so much for coming on and sharing his insight and just allowing me to really go back to a different time for just 1 hour here. So JP, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure, man. Have me back again sometime.
Yeah. This has been Quinn David Furness. This is my podcast, the Beantown Podcast. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We are at BeantownCast. If you have any comments, concerns, or suggestions, you can email us at beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. That's Beantown, BEANTOWN podcast, yahoo.com. Next week, no big plans. It'll be a farewell to June, and then a week after that is a Chicago trip. So I don't know what's going to happen there. We're yet to figure that out. Anyways, thanks for listening. If you made it this far into the podcast, appreciate you. Let me know what you thought. And otherwise, hope you have a good weekend. All right, bye.